I also have two folks from QAIP Solutions, Robert Zimmerman and Adam Boulian. We've been working with QAIP Solutions across the spring. They have been helping us as we go through developing our HIPAA compliance program, and they offer a very interesting software product that helps healthcare providers achieve HIPAA compliance. So I asked them to join us because I think their perspective will be really helpful, and they've definitely been a great resource for us as we've gone through this process. One last logistical note, we will have a quick poll at the end after the Q&A time. So we'll ask if you want to receive any follow-up information. So feel free to answer that, and we will have someone follow up with you to discuss next steps. So with that, we'll jump in. So we've got two different things happening here simultaneously as we think about the healthcare industry. We're seeing healthcare administrative costs skyrocketing, and the additional personnel required to navigate regulations associated with the ACA is placing providers under increasing pressure to manage their costs. So at the same time that's happening, what we're seeing is that technology is driving more and more of a provider's interaction with their customers online. People want to do things on the line. And so that's changing the way that providers are able to manage data, how they're able to collect critical information about their patients and their customers. So if healthcare providers are going to be able to control costs and connect with customers the way they want to be interacted with, they're going to have to engage with these new technologies, but they've got to do it really carefully. The regulation, as you all well know, around the collection of this information leaves no room for error. So what we're going to talk about today is how CallTrackingMetrics can help you collect information that really can drive the performance of your practice, of your business, while also helping you stay in compliance with HIPAA and the other regulations associated with it. So most of you on the line probably are very familiar, more familiar than you ever probably wanted to be about HIPAA, but I thought just for hygiene's sake, we'll do a quick kind of overview. So PHI is a word you hear a lot as it relates to HIPAA. It's protected health information. It's basically information that relates to the health of an individual, the provision of care to them, or the payment of care for an individual. It can also be kind of more broad than that. It can be anything that also helps to identify that individual. And in particular, as we think about the scenario here in our software, it's information that's transmitted or maintained in electronic form or in any other medium. Another kind of definition to just kind of know about is this idea of a covered entity. Covered entity is healthcare plan, a clearinghouse, healthcare providers, or anyone who is electronically transmitting health information, right? So a doctor would be a covered entity, a dentist would be anyone who is providing care. And then the last definition here is a business associate. This is someone who is performing a service or some kind of activity for a covered entity that involves the use or disclosure of protected health information. So you can think of CallTrackingMetrics, for example, as a business associate because we're providing a service to the covered entities that involves protected health information. The two kind of core parts of HIPAA that that we tend to be most involved with are the privacy rule and the security rule. The HIPAA privacy rule covers protected health information in any medium. And you can think of the security rule as kind of a subset of the privacy rule, and in particular, it covers electronic protected health information. So with the security rule in particular, we need to make sure we have administrative, technical, and physical safeguards in place to make sure that that information is handled appropriately. So let's talk a little bit about kind of why would you want to use call tracking in the first place? Why would you want to have to deal with all these regulations? What makes it worth it, right, to collect this information? So let's talk about some of the benefits. There's kind of three main groups that we tend to work with as we think about our call tracking solution. The first is the marketer. And as you think about the benefit of tracking phone calls for a marketer can then associate every single inbound call back to an advertisement or some kind of promotion or marketing campaign that they're running for that business, whether it be online or offline. So whether it's a Google AdWords click or a newspaper ad they're running. They can get detail like which landing page was this person on, which keyword did they type into Google, which ad did they see that they clicked on, which radio ad did they hear. All of this information can also be incorporated into analytics platforms that they use that every day to help them optimize the spending of these advertising campaigns like Google Analytics and AdWords. For the agent, think about an agent in like a call center, for example, or even in a small office, somebody who's just answering the phone. As soon as the phone rings, that person can see what led that caller to the business, giving them an indication about what they might be interested in so that they may be able to handle that call more effectively. They can see things, again, like the keywords they searched. What pages have they viewed on the website? And have they called before? How often have they called? Who on my team has talked to them before? And then finally, seeing demographic information about the caller, such as their age, their sex, their income. Are they married? Are they not married? Information like that that can help them, again, kind of understand this person more quickly and maybe able to help them more effectively and quicker. And then finally, for the manager, so for the general manager, for the business owner, for the call center manager, whoever it may be, real-time dashboards will show them who's on the phone, who's not on the phone, who's missing calls, who's having good calls that are being scored and converted versus people who are not handling calls as well. They can see analytics about the conversations, and they can even do things like live listen to the calls as they're happening to spot check, how are these calls going? So those are some of the benefits as you think about the three categories that we tend to work with. Now let's talk about some features in particular that as we look at providers, what they're finding most helpful in the software right now. The first one is smart call routing. And this kind of encompasses a lot of different tools that we have that gets phone calls to the right place quickly. As this slide says, smart routing can make your staff more effective because you will achieve satisfaction, resolution, and make the most of those phone calls in the shortest time and involving the fewest people, right? It's a win-win all around. This list here are some of the different ways that we can help you route your calls. And the nice thing about these tools is they can be set up from the very simple to very complex. We have customers who are routing calls to 2 agents. We have customers who are routing calls to hundreds of agents in 30 countries around the world. It can grow with you as your company grows. So things like call queues allow you to route calls in smart ways to agents based on their location and their schedule. You can set up different schedules for the time of the day of the week. You might want your calls to be handled differently during the week than on the weekend. You might want to distribute calls based on the caller's demographic profile, and I'll talk more about that one. You might want to geographically route calls. If you have 5 offices, you might want all of your Maryland callers to go to your Maryland office, whereas your Virginia callers should go to your Virginia office, right? Get people, again, to the right place quickly. IVR menus can help parse callers into finding out what they're calling about so you can get them to the right place. And then things that you would come to expect to help handle hold time and things like that, such as hold music, messages you can play while people are on hold, and no answer rules, so that you never miss a call. And while people are on hold, you're trying to make the most of that time. So I wanted to show you an example in the product of smart call routing because it's actually kind of a newish feature for us, and in particular it's the routing based on the demographic profile of a caller. So I set up 2 conditional routers here. My first is Dr. Laurie's practice female callers. So I'll just show you kind of how this works in action. So let's say I am an office here, a doctor's office here, and I want to route new callers who are female to a particular agent or a particular group of agents in my office, and I want to play a particular message to those people only when they call in and we're waiting for the call to be answered. So you'll see here I have a message here that says, please hold while we connect you. Did you know that we just opened our Meta Spa? Ask our customers, ask about our new customer special on peels, right? So you can customize that message based on who this person is. And I might want to route that call to an agent on my team who's really good at talking about this kind of stuff. And Jenny, I know, is really good about that. And I also know that I want to tag these people in a certain way automatically so that all my reporting can be broken down that way. So these people I'm going to tag as new patient female. So it's just a simple example for you. The other one I have here is Dr. Lori's practice again, and this one is mothers. So I want to look at all callers coming in who have children, who are female, who are married, and I'm going to play a message to them that says, while they're waiting, please hold while we connect you. Ask our receptionist about our new surgery package we're offering that will make you look 25 again. Again, play it in a woman's voice and route these calls to Lynn, because Lynn is really good at talking to people about the mother's package at my plastic surgery office, right? And tag these calls as mothers. Again, simple example, you can imagine the possibilities with this. I'll just show you here all the different kind of things you can use to identify your callers. So you might want to look at location to identify your callers. You might want to look at where they were on your website. So if they were on a particular page, route them to a particular person on my team who's really good at talking about the content on that page. So lots of different options here. You can use household income as an indicator of where to route your calls and how to handle them. Lots of different things you can do. So that's our smart router. That's kind of the latest enhancement to our routing. We've always had kind of geographic routing and queue-based routing, but this is something fairly new that we've released. So the next one I wanted to talk about here is lead distribution. So another kind of aspect of working with this industry in particular is we have a lot of customers who are lead distributors. They are people who are doing advertising usually at a national level, and they are distributing calls as they come in to clients that they have around the country. And our software helps them because they can come in and set up a system that identifies how many calls each customer should receive. They can prioritize them. They can even set prices per call per customer. All of this can be done on a white labeled version of our software. So you might be, a distributor who's running big national TV ad buys, and every call that comes in, you're distributing behind the scenes to dentists around the country. You can white label our solution so that your dentists, your customers, can log in and not know anything about CallTrackingMetrics. They can see all their phone calls. They can see how many calls you've sent to them. They can listen to their phone calls. It's a great extension of the service that lead distributors are already offering and gives the end customer, a ton of reporting that they can see. So I'll show you just kind of an example of this. If I go into our queues, and I'm going to take the example of depression leads. So we work with a lot of people in the addiction and recovery space, and this would be an example of if you were a lead distributor for, maybe you're running big ads targeting people who have depression. This queuing system would allow you to set up a way to route calls to all of your customers. And if you look at the routing rules here, maybe these are my 4 customers. These are the 4 addiction centers that I want to route calls to. And you can have lots of flexibility around how you route the calls to them. You can indicate how many calls they should get per month, how many concurrent calls they can handle at one time. So something kind of, this is kind of interesting. You might have some of your clients who have purchased packages where they get 50 calls a month from you. Others maybe only purchase 10. Maybe some of them only have one person answering the phone. Others have 50. So they can handle more calls at a time than others. So that's just an example of how a lead distributor might set up a queue in the system. Another aspect of the service, as we think about healthcare providers in particular, is the Softphone. If you've never used a Softphone, it's basically a phone system that's in your computer. It's all it requires is an internet connection and a headset. We're all using them right now. You know, many offices are moving away from traditional phone systems and going to a completely browser-based Softphone. Our Softphone is incorporated into our product. It's right there. Anytime you're in the product, you'll see the little phone tab, and you can make calls and receive calls from right inside the product. The nice thing about it is it has all the features of a traditional phone system, like transferring, conferencing, hold, and it also has things like the call recording, the ability to live listen. And the nice thing is its agents can be taking calls anywhere. So anywhere they have an internet connection, whether it's in France or Washington, D.C., wherever they are, they can just open up their laptop, get online, and start taking calls. So it provides a lot of flexibility and not a lot of upfront costs at all. So let's talk about some of the HIPAA compliant features in particular. So in order to kind of be using us in a HIPAA compliant fashion, there's a few things that you would need to turn on in your account. So I'll go through those with you. So the first one is the encryption of your call recordings. So as we think about PHI in the context of CallTrackingMetrics, call recordings is kind of the #1 most obvious one, right? It's the recordings of the conversations. That is where you're most likely to have potentially sensitive information in the CallTrackingMetrics system. So those in particular, you'll notice a lot of the security features are focused on those in particular. So encrypted call recordings is something you can turn on very easily in your account. That's right here on the call settings page. And you can go into your configuration. And there's just 2 little toggles you need to turn on. You need to turn on the encrypted call, actually just one, encrypted call recordings right here. There is a small additional fee for them to handle the storage of those recordings, but it's definitely something you want to do if you want to be using this in a HIPAA compliant way. The next one is individual logins for each user. This is something that's kind of basic hygiene of your account, but it's definitely something we wanted to call out. You should never have people sharing logins. That becomes very problematic when it comes time for you to need to be able to track down who accessed something in particular in the system. So every single user on your staff who's going to be accessing CallTrackingMetrics needs to be logging in with their own login. That's very easy in CallTrackingMetrics because we don't have any limitations on the number of users you can have for the account, and we have a ton of user access levels. So you can choose the level of access that you want each person to have. The third item here is making sure that login is required for all interaction with call recordings. So this is something that you are going to turn on in your agency settings here. So I'm going to just show you where to do that. So you're going to have a security section here in agency settings. And one thing I'll mention here, it was on that slide, but I'll just mention it here while I'm in here. These features are available on the advanced plan or the elite plan. It's also known as the enterprise plan for those of you who have been around for a while. So if you are on the essentials plan, you're not going to see this. So that's just one thing you need to do is make sure you upgrade to the advanced plan, and that you'll have these features that you'll see. So as I mentioned, within the security area, you're going to have a whole section here that is going to be limiting the access of call recordings. So right here, you're going to want to turn this on. That requires a user to log in to access any call recordings. That may seem kind of odd, but what it's basically saying is that if for some reason, let's say you have an email notification set up that includes a link to the call recording, you wouldn't want just anybody to be able to click on that link in that email and listen to it. Somebody could forward that email to 500 people, and all 500 of those people could just click on that link and listen to the recording. You want anybody who clicks on that link to have to actually have a login to your account in CallTrackingMetrics to listen to that call recording. That's really important, so you want to turn that on. We also recommend that you even go a step further than that and require a custom PIN to access those call recordings. So that way, maybe you have some users of your account who you don't want to be able to listen to call recordings. Just don't give them that PIN, and then they wouldn't be able to. So we recommend turning both of these on, but definitely you need to turn on the first one. The other option is, or the other feature you need to make sure and turn on is the security around login. So the first one here is automatic logout. This account in here is set to 16 hours to log people out. That's not good. You would not want that. So you want that to be more like 10 minutes. And that means that if somebody is sitting idle and not using their account, then it will log them out and they'll have to log back in. Okay, so you want to make sure that's set at something around 10-15 minutes. You also would want to turn on two-factor authentication. What this does is it adds an extra level of authentication for each of your users, and they need to receive a verification code on their cell phone and log in with that verification code. You can choose to have that happen every time they try to log in or every 30 days. Okay, so you definitely want to turn on that option. The other aspect of the security of the PHI is thinking about your notifications. Notifications are a very commonly used reporting feature of CallTrackingMetrics. Many people rely on them heavily to kind of keep tabs on what is going on in their account on a daily basis. So you want to make sure when you come into your notifications that you have removed fields that may potentially contain sensitive information. So I've created a secure notification, and this is an email I want to get after every phone call. And down here, the key part is you want to make sure and only have fields included that don't contain sensitive information. So that may be a little bit different for each of you depending on how you're using the software. We have some recommendations here, things that you might want to remove, right? So you might want to just remove the call recording link altogether. Even if you are requiring login, just play it safe and remove it. But there's some things that would be fine to include, right? It might be fine to include the tracking number that the person called, right? It might be fine to include how long the call was. Was it a missed call? Was it an answered call? So you can include some basic information. You just want to kind of carefully look at which fields you're using in your call log and how you're using them, and choose to only include those fields that don't contain potentially sensitive information. The other thing that you can do that's commonly used is create an access control group that just limits anybody at a certain access level from being able to see certain fields in your account. So even when they're logged in, you can have an access control group, and I've created one here called agents, and I could put all of my agents in here. So everybody I have that is on my team that is accepting calls, I can just completely turn off entire sections of call data from them being able to see, because they may not need to see it for their day-to-day job, right? So it's all about making sure that people are only seeing what's absolutely critical for them to see. So I might not want them to be able to see the source detail information. I might not want them to be able to see the audio recording. I might not be able to want them to see something like, maybe I don't want them to be able to see the person's email address, or maybe I don't want them to be able to see the advertising source they called through. You can turn these on and off, but this is yet another way where you can just completely cut out certain pieces of information from being accessed by people on your team, even if they're logged in. So that's the last thing that you definitely want to take a look at and set up for your account. And then besides that, the other piece of it is the business associate agreement. So if you would like to be using CallTrackingMetrics in a HIPAA compliant way, we have instructions at the end here on the slide to just contact us and let us know. You can start turning on all these features right now. So as long as you're on the advanced plan, go ahead in here and start turning all of this on. There's nothing we have to do that. The BAA, you will want to just email us at info@CallTrackingMetrics to request to start the process for a business associate agreement, and we'll be in touch with you. We need to find out the name you want on the BAA and everything, and we'll prepare that for you so that we can both parties can sign it. So all in all, it's a pretty quick process. There's very minimal extra cost. There's really the only extra cost is the encryption, which is just a small per minute cost for the storage. So at this point, I wanted to make sure, like I said, that we have plenty of time for questions at the end. So I'm going to go ahead over here and take one moment and we'll start to look through the questions. Now, one thing I did want to do while we're looking through questions and getting started to answer them is like I said, I had asked Robert and Adam from QAIP to join us, and I wanted to have them just spend a minute talking about what they do because they have a really interesting product and it might be something that might come in handy or become useful for some of you that are on the phone. So Robert or Adam, did you want to take just a minute to kind of describe what your software does?
Yes, thank you, Lori. This is Robert with QAIP Solutions. Our solution is HIPAA HITECH Express, and very quickly, the idea behind it is to change the paradigm that healthcare security and privacy has to be complex and costly. So what we've developed is a solution based on our experience working at HHS, working in healthcare, working in really all facets of the industry. We realized there needed to be a better way to attain compliance, not just for HIPAA, but for healthcare compliance in general. So we have a TurboTax-like all-in-one total solution. Just like TurboTax, it drives you through the whole process. So just as we did with CallTrackingMetrics, it's not just an assessment tool, but it carries you through step by step, provides you everything you need, including all the documentation and evidence that's required. And at the end of it, after you are done, you're eligible and ready to become HIPAA compliant. And we also have an audit process tied to a foundation that basically gets you certified. So the end result of all this is in a very timely, rapid way. So instead of taking months, you can do this in a very straightforward way. It includes coaching from us on any issues that you have to help with your success. So the end result is you can save basically 90% of outside consulting budget and 80% of your employees' time, and that's always an issue as this is just one more thing every organization has to deal with. So at the same time, it's very cost effective, it's still comprehensive, and positions you for new business opportunities. If you are looking to work in healthcare more and more, everyone's asking, are you HIPAA compliant? Audits are increasing, large organizations are asking it, so it's just a thing, one, to help make your organization more secure so you don't have a problem, but it also can be a great ongoing marketing tool. So Lori, that's our quick overview. Obviously, we're more than happy to discuss in more detail the solution and how it works with anyone, provide a demo. But it is about as straightforward a solution for security and privacy as you're going to find in the industry.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert. Okay, so it looks like we had some questions come in. And it looks like, let's see, how do you know what the gender of the caller is the first one. So we have a caller ID database that we use through a company called Nextcaller. Right, Todd, is that right? Nextcaller. Yep. So they provide all sorts of demographic information about callers. It's a service that they provide, and that is something that you will want to enable in your account. So let me just show you where you want to enable that, because that is something. Oh, sorry, they just let me know my screen's not being shared. Just apologize. Okay. So that is set up in call settings, which is right here, and it's called Premium Caller ID. And we'll go right down here. So you'll want to enable Enhanced Caller ID. That's what gets you that extra demographic information like the gender, the income, and everything like that. It's, again, through that service called Nextcaller. And they use a variety of data sources to collect all that information, and they're always adding additional information. And we just heard from them they're adding things like square footage of your house and like what kind of, what is your house made of? Is it brick or is it siding? So they're always looking at different things they can add to that database because it can be used in so many different ways by different companies. Okay, next question.
So our next question is, can the 8x8 phone numbers be used in call tracking metrics, or do we need to have a call tracking metrics number and point the 8x8 to that number?
I can answer that one. So to answer that question, you would need to point a call tracking metrics phone number to your 8x8 phone number. So we would forward the call to you.
Okay, and we have another question. If we do not enable recordings, what items do we not need to be concerned about in terms of HIPAA compliance?
So if you don't have call recordings turned on, you don't need to worry about the encryption of your call recordings, and you don't need to worry about requiring login for the recordings. Those are the main items. You still might have PHI in some of the call data that you're collecting. So you still will want to just look through and make sure that you're not, like if, for example, if your agents are taking notes in the call log and those notes may have very detailed information about what the caller was calling in about, you might want to make sure that those notes are obviously being protected and that you're not including them in notifications, and that you're, again, making sure everybody has their own login to log in and access that information. But yeah, we need to worry about the encryption of the call recordings, and you would not need to worry about having login required for the call recordings.
We have another question about the security settings. If you set up the security in agency settings, will that change for every account?
Yeah, I can answer that one as well. So it will. So the agency settings allow you to override at the sub-account level. So what you can do is you can set up either you could set up sort of an agency setting here. So where Lori's showing here, allow sub-accounts to override these security settings. You could do that at the agency level, and then you can go into the sub-accounts and individually set up HIPAA compliant settings in those sub-accounts. What it means is that as a user, so if you have two-factor requirement to access a sub-account but not the agency, then when you log in, you can get into the other sub-accounts that don't have two-factor, but when you use the switcher to switch into one of those other accounts, you'll get the two-factor prompt before you're allowed to get into that other account.
Okay, next question. Is there an option to put a custom login password for notifications, or is the custom login password more for the site itself and reports?
Yeah, I'll answer that one as well. So the custom username and password is for explicitly for accessing call recorded data. So when you're thinking about the different factors of authentication into our system, you have your username and password, which is one factor. You have your token, which you get from our two-factor authentication, which is a text message or Google Authenticator. Then you can add an additional layer of security over those audio recordings, which is a shared password amongst your account. Yeah, so really what you could do there is you could have 3 factors of authentication to access a call recording.
And Rob, this one's actually for you. Somebody wanted to know what the name of the product that you were discussing was.
Okay, the name of the product is HIPAA HITECH Express. It's a simplified approach to security and privacy compliance.
Great, thanks, Rob. We also had a question about the type of encryption that we use for call recording.
The recordings use AES 256 encryption.
Okay, and Lori, back on one of the slides where you were talking about the different security features, what does number 7 refer to? Was that specific to logging, or it was a question about logging? What does that refer to?
Okay, Yeah, so how do we, or what sort of information are we logging? So we're obviously logging IP address, user, and what. So it's where, who, and what, and when. Yeah. So that means that anytime somebody accesses a call recording, we were making a record of that event. Anytime they're logging in, a record of that event, switching into an account, viewing a phone call, these kinds of activities we're logging. Yep.
Now we have a question about our BAA. Does your BAA cover both the agency and their clients, or the agency's clients have to sign a separate BAA with you?
This is Lori. I can take that one. So we'll have two different business associate agreements that we can put into place with you. If you are a covered entity working directly with us, we'll have one type of business associate agreement where we're the business associate and the the doctor's office is the covered entity. If you are an agency and you're our customer and you have customers that are covered entities, it'll be a different BAA agreement where we will be working with you as a subcontractor. You then should have business associate agreements in place with your customers, right? So it's kind of, we're the business associate, the agency is the subcontractor, and then you should have agreements in place with your customers to make sure, again, just to make sure that the roles are, everybody's clear on kind of what the expectations are of everybody involved.
Great. And we also have questions about the caller ID information. So is caller ID information such as name and phone number something that needs to be protected for HIPAA compliance? Robert, is that something that you might be able to?
Yeah, we can definitely answer that.
Perfect.
Yes, it does, because anything that can be used as an identifier for a individual, such as name and phone number, you can obviously identify who they are, where they are, and then tie potentially other discriminating factors to them. So that is definitely considered personal health information.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, this one's a little bit long, but how do you handle the intelligent routing when our calls are going to skill groups, agent teams that already have this? In other words, in the example that Lori provided, you had the lead distribution go to your 4 agents, but what if it goes to an agent team or a skills-based group?
Yeah, I can answer this one. So I think the way you would handle this is that in the router, once you've identified the aspect of the caller, you would tag that call. Then what you would do is in your call queue, you would also have tagged your agents based on their skills. This will line up the skill or the attribute of the incoming caller with the skill of the agents.
So I think that was all of the questions. If anybody has any additional questions, we still have a few minutes. So if you've got anything you want to ask, feel free to enter it in the questions box.
Okay, so I think we've gotten through all the questions. Is there one more? There's one more coming in.
Okay, we've got just a couple more. This one is call encryption something we can simply turn on, or is it a product that we have to purchase separately?
It's just something you can turn on, so you don't have to do anything separate. It's just there's an extra charge for all the recordings that are encrypted that are stored. You can delete recordings, but the charge is pretty minimal, so it would take a very long time to build up a substantial monthly charge.
Okay, we have another question that says, what happens if there are multiple hops?
I can speak to that. So I think what you're asking is if I'm hopping between multiple phone systems. So maybe you have like um, yeah. So basically, you want to try and avoid as many hops as you can. So it's one of the advantages of using our soft phone is that it's going to minimize the number of hops. So I know somebody had mentioned 8x8 and forwarding to 8x8, but one of the things they might want to look at is simply replacing 8x8 with the soft phone. It would be a much simpler setup, probably a great way to reduce cost and overhead, and as well would increase the call quality because you would be reducing the number of hops of that phone call.
Okay, and there was a quick follow-up to that that just stated, we don't use soft phones. We have a phone system.
Okay, to each is their own. We also have the ability to ring to SIP phones as an alternative. Those would be desk phones. But we can accommodate, right? So we can forward phone calls to a PSTN line or DID, and just the same as we can dial a soft phone.
Great. Okay, so I think that's everything. No more questions from the group, so we appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for calling in, everyone. We do have a quick poll, as I mentioned, at the end here. So we'll want to just have you quickly answer that, if you don't mind. And we'll follow up with any, and if you have any other questions, obviously feel free to get in touch with us. We're happy to help. Otherwise, we'll look forward to talking with you, all of you, and hope everyone has a good afternoon. Thank you.